Welcome to Mindset U Podcast, your source of mindset education. We aim to provide you with free, valuable education for you to thrive. Enjoy. In today's episode, Moses and I, as transformational coaches, are understanding and dissecting the concepts of change. Listen to learn how we help someone find root reasons for their desires to change. One of the premier things that we focus on as coaches, people come to us because they want to change something in their lives. Mm-hmm. Though we're kind of rooted in the same philosophies, same concepts, we both have slightly different approaches, different angles in which we come in.
Yeah, I think the first thing I would ask you is when a client comes to you and says, "Oh, I want to change," what's the first step? Where do you start?
First of all, is to uncover the motive. Why? Why do you want to change? That is usually a very hard question to honestly answer for the person, because someone that wants to desperately change, they want to leave, escape where they're at. We talk about the principles of pain, pleasure, right? But from their perspective, they feel like, isn't it obvious? Something's wrong with me. I need to fix this thing.
Do you notice that it's always something wrong? So let's go something really basic, like someone losing weight, wanting to lose weight.
Yeah.
So when you ask them why, what's the typical thing?
It's like an eye roll, can't you see?
Yeah.
If it's someone that wants to lose, they say, I just want to lose 5 pounds, right? Because I want my clothes to fit better, all these reasons that is just kind of proof of the root argument. But to get into it a little deeper, that's the whole thing. What is the root argument? Mm-hmm. Because again, going back to the pain pleasure principle, just to explain a little bit, the pain pleasure principle is the concept that when we move, our motivation to move into a direction, to make a change, to do anything, we're either running away from pain or running towards pleasure. And I think that base concept formulates the idea and the understanding as to why you want to ask the question as to why you want to change, because now it helps you understand what is the motive. Are you trying to escape something, leave something that you perceive as painful, or are you trying to chase after something that you perceive as pleasurable?
So yes. So it's funny that you talk about this, because I was talking with a friend the other day, and he just had a child, right? Brand new baby. He's a little overweight. And he talks about he can't get motivated to, lose weight. So I asked him, why do you want to lose weight? And he said that he wants to be there for his child. So then the next question I asked is what scares you if you're not there for your child? And he couldn't answer it. So my question is somebody like that who's unable to identify the pain, right? He knows that, I guess, maybe the superficial concept or this surface layer concept of, I'm a new father, so I want to be there as long as possible for my child. But what scares you about that? So then how do you use that emotion to drive some sort of action?
So it's funny because I want to get your perspective of how you handle the situation, because I know you're posing the question for curiosity's sake, but I'm also curious to know how'd you handle it? But for me, there's right away, I imagining myself having that conversation, I clock into two possibilities there, in which to get to that answer, you have to already have a root belief, right? That I'm overweight and that thus something is wrong with me, that I'm hurting my life, my perseverance, perseverance.
I don't know what you're trying to say.
To preserve yourself, self-preserve yourself. It's my dyslexia makes me have trouble with words. They all mix together. But that idea to preserve self. Yes, it clicks on even heavier, higher, stronger when you have kids, because you see yourself as the protector, as the defender. But I said it clicks higher, meaning it's already there. There's a perspective that exists, that there's something threatening my life. Me being overweight, that already exists. I didn't become aware of it now that I have kids. So now the perspective that it increased the motive with my child being born is like, yes, that's an added on layer, but what's below it? What's my driver? What's my belief? What's my perspective on this? And to me, what I'm trying to dig into is understand the mindset, because there's usually a very strong label underneath all of that that's creating a structured mindset of perspective on self and on self-ability. So I want to understand that so I can understand that person as a whole.
So I agree with you. Like in that conversation with him, like obviously in the setting that we were in, it was hard to get into more vulnerable states,
Which is what we have a challenge with all the time.
Yeah. So you can tell that he was having trouble because he got to a point where it required him to be vulnerable, and he didn't know he got stuck. Mm-hmm. Right. But the thing is like, is he aware to be vulnerable enough to kind of understand that? So ideally, this is my assumption about the gentleman, is that the motive, he would like his daughter or his child to be the motive to be able to get to a place that he desired prior to his child being born. Mm-hmm. So the desire of losing weight and being thin, right, comes from what he used to be. Mm-hmm. Right? I used to work out. I used to be in shape. I used to do all these things. Now, habits have changed, right? Belief systems change, and his body changed along with it. So my assumption is he's made attempts to get back to the state that he desires to be in, but has trouble. So now the motive that he says to himself, the answer that he ideally wants it to be, the reason to get in shape, is his daughter. But the reason that it's not the motive, like that's not the motive, of course, that may be one of the external kind of things that play a role.
One of the legs.
Yeah, one of the legs, but it's not the desire. It's like he doesn't feel good about himself. But to admit that, right, it's a very vulnerable thing. So until like that action or that step is taken to really admit like why you want to change, like the shit that makes you want to cry, the ugly stuff that makes you feel bad about yourself, right? That is, to me, identifying that is the first step.
It's funny is you say the stuff that makes you want to cry, and immediately what I thought of is like, yeah, the high emotional reaction, right? Because it doesn't necessarily have to be like crying. Yeah. It could be any emotion, but basically the thing that pushes that emotion to that top edge, right? And we talk about emotions being energy in motion, like that's tons of potential energy to create the change. So if you can tap into that and understand that, now you can drive that change using that root source. Mm-hmm. So that's why it's so important to understand this concept. It's not just to probe and prod, because I have a friend who gets very upset. He's like, when I start doing this, when I start exploring, and he gets very upset because he gets obviously very uncomfortable with the vulnerability. He's like, man, why you always got to be asking all that? That don't matter. You just do the stuff, right? And it's interesting because he doesn't want to go there because he feels like if he goes there, he loses traction. He loses kind of like the clear goal. When in actuality, that does happen for a moment. Like you lose that energy to take action, but it's kind of like a reset. It's kind of filling up the gas tank, because what happens is when you uncover that reason, you have to face that possibility that you may have a clash with that perspective of self.
Mm.
So, like, for example, if you want to think of yourself as like, I'm not shallow, I don't care about these things, and then you have a very emotionally driven, shallow reason that you're placing that judgment on, now you have this self judgment of like, can't believe I care about this. No, I shouldn't care about this. And then you have this like internal clash that pauses you, and then you're unable to take the action, because now you're having this energy going into this internal fight of the person that you think you should be, right? But after you uncover all of that and put your ducks in a row, if you will, now I believe, and I've seen both in my life and in my clients' life, once that happens, that integration happens, the things get aligned, and you resolve that internal conflict, now it's much easier to turn that energy into action. Because all along, as you said, like if that friend of yours has been trying in the past and failed, there is that element of that internal conflict that provides that resistance. And why you can't put it into motion, into action, is because there's a resistance in there. It could be, and there's just one possibility, it could be that self-judgment, that this is the reason, and now I have a child, this makes a better reason of the person I want to be, so now I can convert that into energy. And yes, that may work, that may, help overcome that hump of that resistance. But if you can just align yourself with your overall perspective of who you are and who you want to be, then it becomes a lot easier to make that change and take that action.
Mm-hmm. So that I totally agree with. And I think if you like furthermore, right, like if someone wants to do that, to me, it's like, if someone wants to be able to change for their child, right, what does the fear look like, right? What does the fear actually feel like to them?
Mm-hmm.
So to me, when I asked that question, he was having trouble explaining like the idea behind this. What he had trouble was understanding the emotion or the feeling or what he was actually feeling.
Mm-hmm.
But then I can also hypothesize that he couldn't answer that question because he didn't necessarily feel it. And the thing with like wanting to create change, right? If it's not painful enough, it's not going to want you to change.
Mm-hmm.
So like when I think about people who struggle with weight, and I think I do this with myself more because people look at me and they automatically assume that, oh, you're thin, whatever, right? You don't have this problem. I'm like, no, I still have a problem with diet. Like I struggle with that aspect of my life. People don't understand it. But the reason is because like, if you don't understand the discomfort of creating change within your diet or the discomfort of creating, and you're not okay with that, like you're not okay with those feelings, then you're never going to do it. Like think about somebody like those stories that we hear of people like lose weight, right? It was a moment in their life where they decided to create a change because they were in some sort of pain and they wanted to get away from that. And they knew that this action was the thing to get them away from that pain.
Mm-hmm.
So is it like, think about a breakup, right? Most people, they might be a little bit overweight after a relationship, right? Because they're comfortable in a relationship, and then they break up, and the breakup hurts so much that what do? They decide to like just become a gym rat and go into the gym and just deal with that.
Mm-hmm.
That was running away from the pain, right? Creating this new identity, because the identity that previously existed that was in a broken relationship, right? That one didn't work, and you wanted to change that. You wanted to get away from that person.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's about understanding what that feeling feels like. Because people say, I'm an anxious person. I'm like, all right, what does that feel like? It's like, I don't know, anxious. You can't describe anxiety. Okay, I'm scared. Okay, what does that feel like?
Mm-hmm.
They can't describe scared. When somebody already at that moment tells me they can't describe something, then it's like, oh, you don't even know where to start. Like, how do you get up and get out of bed to actually take an action if you don't know the emotion?
Yeah.
So I think that's like one of the foundational steps. Like, it's like you need to know what things actually feel like for you.
So I had a few thoughts as you were talking there. Number one is like the whole idea that we talk about consistently, which is physiology, right? When Moses says, don't know what it feels like, it's going down the funnel of like what creates a feeling. The feeling is anxiety. Where does do you break down the components of anxiety? And those are the emotions, right? What are the emotions is the things that are happening inside your body, which is the physiology, the independent parts of the things that are happening inside your body, which is like nervousness, anxiety, right? It feels like your heart is beating out of your chest. You feel like your mind is hyperactive and hyper aware, yet in a cloud. Like these are things that you're sensing within your body that you label as anxiety. And when you're in that aspect of anxiety, of that high emotional state, what happens is that your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that plans and makes decisions and makes sense of things, is taken offline, right? Maybe not entirely, depending on the level of anxiety, it can be completely taken offline. So it's harder for you to think clearly, for you to see the solutions, which is why coaching comes in, because it's on the outside, being able to look at the map, if you will, and being able to point you in a direction, which just calms you down. So that first part is that awareness, is recognizing what are these things that you're feeling and that thought process, that label that you're putting on. So the other thing that it made me think of was like, you talked about like weight loss, right? And managing that. And for me, it's like, for me, everyone like assumes that like, oh, you live a super healthy, restricted life and all this stuff, and kind of like for years I just rolled my eyes, because it's like, oh, at family events, friend events, whatever it is, everyone's like, oh, Rest is around, don't let them see me eating this. It's like, that's with the assumption that I'm here judging everyone, right? And I am not, because I struggle with it too. I use discipline, I use habits, I use routine to help fight against all of that that's coming in. But if I'm at a party and there's donuts and cake and so on and so forth, like there's a lot of energy being used to try to avoid that if I'm not supposed to be having it, because I've decided that I'm going to set a parameter in this week, month, or whatever, that I'm not having those things. So it takes a lot of energy. It's not like it's easy or whatever. And also that I'm not judging everyone else for it, because I know the level of energy and work that it takes to do that, because I literally have spent my life understanding that. So for me to be arrogant enough and say like everyone should spend their life doing that and everyone should be a coach that understands the mind, it's self-centered and arrogant. So for me, in the realm of that, like right now I'm a little heavier than I like to be, right? And like we're doing this program, this jump program, that we keep having the conversation. We keep thinking like, damn, our jump ability is increasing. If we were lighter, that would probably be 2 more inches, 3 more inches in the vertical, which is like, fuck, right? It creates that pain of like, damn it, this. And for me, like in those moments when, because what tends to happen is for me, I'm either completely in shape or completely out of shape, right? So unless I'm in the transition. So in those moments when I'm completely out of shape, it's almost like blindsided. Like I'm like, what the hell happened? I don't even recognize like when I got here. Luckily for me, that measure is much lighter or much heavier to the changes than it is for someone who's like, their work doesn't evolve around that. So I get to notice it, I would say, sooner than someone, because I can see someone easily gaining 30 pounds and be like, oh, when did this happen? Well, for me, because my life is, orbits around that concept, it becomes like a very prevalent principle. But when it comes to performance, that's usually the thing for me. When I feel like my performance is suffering, like, for example, my hips are feeling tight, my knees are feeling achy, or stuff like that. I'm like, yo, what the hell? I need to do something about this, right? Um, this is one, when I like lean forward or go into a squat position and I feel my belly like
Crunch
pushing
up,
against
yeah.
me, that like bothers me a lot. And I'm
Mhm.
like, shit, I need to need to do something about this, because I feel shitty. I feel like poor performance. I feel like I'm unable to explode and take action and so on and so forth. So like that's the pain that I deal with. That it correlates more so to performance than anything else. And then with the program we're doing right now, it's like, all right, performance is suffering because of this. So then now I'm starting to think, all right, what I got to do to, cut some of the fat that I'm carrying around to be able to improve performance.
You hit on one thing that I think a lot of people are not aware of. Well, let's say two things. We can separate them. One is the idea that they don't know everything,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, in that conversation that I had with this friend, he already presented certain ideas about working out and everything that are predicated on old information from years ago when we first started, training, like
Mm-hmm.
old gym habit stuff, like bodybuilder stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
So one is like, what is the information that you're actually missing? And a lot of people are not curious enough to understand, what am I doing wrong? Which then brings me down into like the awareness that you had, like the fat rolling over the belt, right? Your knees and joints hurting. It's being aware of this uncomfortable stuff, right? That then you get curious about. It's like, what the hell am I doing that is making me feel this way? So then, like yesterday, we were in the car, right? And we were talking about, like, because I too gained weight. And I too, I'm like, I think I'm the one that brought it up. I'm like, I think like if I lose 10 pounds, I can jump higher, right? And then you agreed. And then yesterday we were talking about like what's changed in our lives. And we talked about, well, the business changed, the way that we work now has changed. So that has an impact on the timing of when we eat, what we eat, right? The convenience of things, the changes in the lives of our partners, right? Or who now influence the home, and the quality of food and the quantity of food. So it was those is awareness with those discomforts that we get curious about. And necessarily judge, like there is some judgment to it,
Yeah.
right? Obviously. But it's like that judgment doesn't deter us away from trying to find a scientific approach to understand why we got to that point.
What does your health, love life, spirituality, career, finances all have in common? Your mindset. Mindset is the source of creating change. To learn how to install these and other life-transforming concepts, browse through our free collection of courses at betheproject.com.